Hey, it's me, Maggie J. Today with a recap and review of the 4th episode of Reservation Dogs, Season 2. This one is called Mabel, after Alora's grandmother. So given the ending of Episode 3, I fully expected this one to be a sob fest, but I did not cry that much. The more I think about what happened, though, it makes me even more sad for Elora. She spends this episode going through the rituals of death while waiting for her grandma to pass. It's taken me a really long time to write this review. Not a whole lot happens, but there's so many things I want to discuss. I've had to cut this script down from 8 pages, so it might be a bit choppy, but I hope you get the gist. Obviously, Elora and Jackie are home, not just a figment of Bear's imagination, like I thought. We've not been shown them coming back to the res, but by my calculations, they never even made it out of Oklahoma. So they couldn't have been gone for more than 2.5 to 3 days. And if Mabel's been sick or had reason to think Elora was just out with her friends with the car, or whatever made her think she'd not run away, it makes sense that Elora's home now with no one making a big deal of her and Jackie leaving or running away or stealing Mabel's car. We're not told what is happening with Mabel. We just see her laying in bed for the duration of the episode, surrounded by at least one member of her family at all times, and several to many members of the community with spiritual connections. Many of them around her are singers. Fixico is there, burning sage and saying prayers. And it feels like the songs and prayers and smudging is cyclical and happens over and over. Not everyone gets to go through this at home in their own place, surrounded by loved ones. So this is a beautiful ceremony all the way through. I've only been to one longhouse funeral before, and that person was already dead, so I don't know all the pre-customs or traditions, but the cooking, the cleaning, the sitting with the body, the spirit plate, that all feels familiar to me. The first thing I do notice about this episode is the amount of people that have gathered. They are everywhere. Inside, outside, in Mabel's room, and in every other room of the house. And they're all there to bring food or cook food or offer support because they love her or feel obligated to make an appearance. Everyone we know and a whole bunch of others we don't. They all showed up for Mabel and for Elora. P.S. I love the coat this person is wearing. It is so beautiful. The next thing I notice is that this house is exactly the same as Willie Jack's and Bear's house. If you remember what Willie Jack's kitchen looks like, it's exactly the same. And this hallway in Bear's house, it's exactly the same. So while I've not seen the hallway in Willie Jack's house or the kitchen in Bear's, I'm pretty sure I could tell you exactly what they look like. In quick succession, Elora accepts hugs from Rita, the dogs, even Bear's Uncle Charlie, but she doesn't look comforted at all. Obviously, she's going through a lot with her grandma, but there's so much tension amongst the group, they cannot be as comforting to each other as they normally would. A character we've not met before shows up at Mabel's, and we learn her name is Teeny, and everyone is so happy to see her because she's been gone since shortly after Cookie died. Teeny is played by Tamara Podemski, real-life sister to Sarah Podemski, who plays Bear's mother, Rita. If you watched my reviews from last season, you'd know that Willie Jack's mother is played by Jennifer Podemski, another real-life sister to these two. But none of these sisters are related in the show. That is awesome and kind of crazy. Will we see all 3 of these sisters together in the same room? Fingers crossed. Not everyone is so overjoyed about all the people who show up, though. Willie Jack, Bear, and Cheese are upset about Jackie showing up with Aunt Bev, but Elora keeps the same anxious look on her face, so we can't tell how she truly feels about her new, maybe friend showing up where her old friends are. Willie Jack doesn't even try to look happy. She's talking shit under her breath about Jackie's lack of participation in the food prep. Elora says she might not feel welcome to join in, and then invites Jackie to come make fry bread with them. Jackie admits she's not done this before, and Willie Jack calls her a city girl, which Teeny takes offense to because she also lives in the city, but can make better fry bread than any of y'all, so nah. I like this auntie and her energy. She might have been gone for 13-ish years, but she is right at home. Big is a real big flirt with Teeny. He's very forward with his invitations for her to spend more time with him, and she seems almost interested, but falls back on the excuse that she's got a lot of baggage. Like, that's unusual around here. Finally, it's eating time, and the amount of food shows that Mabel was really loved and appreciated by her community. I thought it was funny to watch what people showed up with. Plenty of people brought something in a dish. Bev brought paper plates and napkins. Good thinking. Uncle Brownie brought fountain drinks from Sonic's. What a classic. They all sit together as best as they can in the garage, and here's where two things happen that I wonder why Elora didn't or wasn't able to do these things herself. When everyone is sat, Elora asks if they could pray before they eat, despite most people already having taken bites of their food. I thought perhaps she had something she wanted to share or a mindset she wanted everyone to be in going forward, but she asks Cheese to say the grace. So he does, and it is a fine job, even when he quotes Star Wars. But I wonder why she didn't say it herself, or ask one of the more spiritual leaders that are right inside the house, maybe to give a traditional blessing. Then she asks Bear to take the spirit plate out back, and again, I'm wondering why she wouldn't do that herself. It might be due to custom, that because she's directly related, she's not allowed to do certain tasks, or maybe it's just because she's a woman. It doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on the plot. I'm curious. If you are wondering what a spirit plate is, to my knowledge, it is basically you make a plate of food for the person who is passing on or the person who has already passed on, and then you put it near a place where they would have frequented, so they will find it on their journey, and it will give them the sustenance to carry on. To my knowledge, you do this for a certain amount of days, and every time you eat, you also make a plate for the spirit. And then, each time you go and replenish the plate, you bury the previous food. That's what happened at the Longhouse funeral that I went to. So now that we're clear on that, while Bear takes the spirit plate out to the backyard, he meets the spirit. He says he's here to take Mabel to orientation. Does that mean she's going to be like the spirit? She's a bit of a sour soul for this job, but what do I know? Maybe she'd be perfect for guiding a certain kind of people. In the backyard, the spirit calls Bear out for being there, but not actually being supportive of what his friend is going through. This guy has a real knack for identifying bad behavior in such a way you know that he's not singling the person doing bad out, but merely highlighting a situation that happens over and over again and causes big problems. And whoever he's talking to just happens to be the one in that position right now. How many times has he given this speech before? The spirit goes on to focus on Elora's pain, saying it's causing her a heart nard. Then he sends Bear off to presumably help Elora cope with her heart nard, but Bear does not help his friend, not in the least, and I am not happy about it. Inside, after the meal, Willie, Jack, Bear, and Cheese are all watching Elora and Jackie clean up in the kitchen. And they're talking shit about Jackie, complaining about why she's here, etc. While they are doing the dishes, Jackie asks Elora if they're going to take off again, once all this is settled. And Elora agrees, but I can tell by her face that she's probably not into that anymore. Not only did Jackie prove to be less than stellar at being a street-smart teenage runaway, Elora is in a completely different position than she was when they decided to leave the reservation. Later on, it is time for the adult women to clean the kitchen, and they are so loud while talking about the good old days. Elora can't help but overhear their comments about her grandma Mabel, about how funny she is, how she is so sweet and loving, but Elora knows none of that, because Mabel has been damaged goods since she lost her daughter. Elora even asks her, "When were you ever sweet?" Teeny and Big seem like they have extenuating circumstances they're dealing with when it comes to each other, and after dark, out in the backyard, they have a deep exchange about whether it's best to come together before a death happens or to let a death be the catalyst that causes a family to grasp onto each other. As always, the conversation comes back around to Cookie's death and what would have happened if they could have come together after her instead of now, which is a great fucking question, Teeny. Big confesses he doesn't know why he's there. He feels like he's not really doing much. But then Teeny tells him they're there for Elora, which kind of pisses me off because if any of these characters were really there for Elora, she wouldn't be where she is now. Not location-wise, but mentally and spiritually. She's been suffering this whole time while living with Mabel, and the entire family has been letting it happen. Now that they're ready or feel that there's no one else to carry this burden, now they'll show up and try to be there for a person who's become nearly an adult while they were off trying to cope with their own grief. Maybe this is my own teenage resentment talking because no matter how long Elora has been without good guidance, I know that this is such a pivotal time for her to have more people around her who can help her. So I don't dislike that Teeny wants to step up and be there for her more now. I just wish she wouldn't have phrased it like that's what they, as in the adults around her, have been doing the whole time, being there for Elora. Anyway, people finally start heading home or to wherever, and those who stayed are finding it hard to stay awake. Big winds up sleeping in a chair, looking like a zombie, twitching every now and again. Bear knocks out on the couch, and oddly, Jackie is sitting beside him, slumped onto his shoulder, fast asleep. Aww. Cheese and Willie Jack don't like the look of that. Even later on, I know I keep saying later on, but we're almost to the end. So even later on, Bear is still sleeping on the couch, but Jackie woke up and moved to the far side. Cheese is now in the middle spot. She asks if he doesn't like her, and his response is more along the lines that no, he doesn't, because he's not supposed to. But he seems pretty eager to move beyond that because she's probably a better person than they thought that she would be. Like, she says that she's only there because her Aunt Bev made her come, but Bev left a while ago, and here she is, still hanging out with these people who she knows don't like her. What's that all about, Jackie? As the sun rises the next morning, Cheese is now slumped over and sleeping on Jackie's shoulder, and this house is full of people sleeping anywhere they could find to rest their bodies. Uncle Brownie comes to tell Elora it's time, and the singing grows louder as she and Teeny rush to Mabel's side. It doesn't take long for her to pass. It is a beautiful scene with the singing and the prayers and Mabel being surrounded by people who love her. Once she is gone, Teeny and Rita turn their attention to Elora, but she rushes from the room saying she needs air. Bear has woken up by this point, and he and Elora lock eyes for a few moments before she continues, running out of the house. In the backyard, Elora finally cries. Throughout nearly this entire show, anytime she's talked about Mabel, her voice has been flat. Her answers were short, and you could tell she was shutting down how she felt about her relationship with her grandma. Aside from her being teary-eyed at the end of episode 3, she managed not to cry throughout this entire series about her grandma until just this moment. And what happens next is literally my favorite part about this entire episode. So, there's my girl, crying her heart out. When who do we hear but Mabel herself saying, "Hey, shit ass, I'm a spirit." And then she laughs, and Elora is shocked out of her emotions for a moment. Mabel says she just wanted to thank Elora. She did a good job today. And then she goes. She offers no niceties, no advice. She doesn't tell Elora she loves her or apologize for how her actions negatively affected her. Her only demand is that Elora not get rid of the Blue Willow dishes. And then she disappears. And I am weirdly happy about that. If Mabel was apologetic or remorseful, it would have been an admission that she knew that how she was treating Elora was wrong, and she could have tried to correct it at any time. But this This just feels like how these two interacted, without much compassion or even many words. So it feels like a very genuine exchange between them. I may be alone in this, but I think that this is the kind of goodbye that would help Laura cope with this loss better, because she wasn't shown a different side of the woman that she grew up with. She doesn't have to waste time wondering if there was something that could have changed to make Mabel be a nicer, more involved grandmother. Mabel didn't try to change their dynamic. Laura just didn't know the woman that Cookie's friends knew. So she doesn't have to mourn the loss of that person who she never got to know. I don't know if I'm explaining this well. It's more of a feeling that I have, but whatever. I think this was a great ending, and I hope Laura will break the cycle and deal with her grief before it ruins her spirit. Overall, I give this episode 3 stars. It was a good one, don't get me wrong, but not much happened. It wasn't overly funny, because obviously. There were a couple of things that I did not like about this episode, and since there wasn't much else to focus on, they kind of dragged down the rating. For instance, I did not like how Bear behaved for nearly all of this. Yes, he did hug Elora at the beginning, but he had several big opportunities to do like the spirit suggested and do more than just make an appearance for his friend, to show her he's really there for her during this time, and he just didn't. Even after the last episode, with so many lessons about being a man and making good choices the first time around and having to deal with consequences and not being able to fix some mistakes, I was so disappointed that he did not come around the corner at the very end and wrap Elora in a hug as the last scene of the episode. I know he's mad at her, but this is Elora's worst moment of her life. They can be upset with each other later on. I was also very confused about the Teeny character the first time I watched. I read somewhere that she is Pumpkin's sister, so she is Bear's aunt, and I think someone called her Aunt Teeny, and I got my wires crossed. And then the way that she behaved toward Mabel, like sitting closest to her and holding her hand while she passed, and telling Elora that the house was going to be hers, like she was going to make sure that that happened. It all came together in my mind that Cookie, Pumpkin, and Teeny were siblings, and then nothing made sense. But then I watched again and realized I was way wrong. I'm pretty sure Cookie, Teeny, Rita, and maybe a few other women were just good friends while growing up, maybe cousins, but it still doesn't explain why Teeny held Mabel's hand instead of Elora, or why she asks Rita if they're good when she comes in, or how she knows so much about Mabel's last wishes that she can assure Elora that the house will be hers when she's been gone for more than a dozen years. Also, if my assumption from last episode that Bear's Uncle Charlie is the brother of his father Pumpkin, Uncle Charlie and Teeny were both at this funeral wake thing and they didn't have any interactions between them that showed that they were happy to see each other after more than a dozen years. It just feels weird. I know I'm putting a lot on the assumptions that I have made, but I have nothing else to go on because natives are so secretive with all of their relationship stories. I think because it would just take too long to tell. This is why newcomers can't understand their place on the res, because all of these relationships and extenuating circumstances go back beyond anybody even wants to discuss anymore. You're just supposed to know who belongs to who and belongs to what, since when and why and how. You're just supposed to know. Yes, I'm being nitpicky because I'm curious. But I know that the next episode is about all of these aunties hanging out together, so I've got high hopes for some big revelations in the next one about Aunt Teeny, about Cookie, about Big. I know that there's a sad story there. I can't wait. Aside from my complaints, there was so much to admire and enjoy throughout this episode. I fell in love with the food, though. Seriously, are we going to get a Res Dogs cookbook? Because there are so many delicious-looking dishes featured throughout this entire series. I would be the first one in line to buy one of these cookbooks. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about Devery Jacobs. I believe this is a woman we will be seeing for a long time, involved in many native and non-native projects, and not just in front of the camera either. She got her first writing credit for co-writing this episode, and if watching TV too much has taught me anything, it's that when an actor starts contributing to the writing, it's not a far leap to directing. And not a problem, this is just a fact. Devery Jacobs is a little bit older than the rest of the teenage cast here, so so her becoming an executive producer is likely something she's already considering, especially if this show goes to a season 3. She'd be silly not to ask how to become an EP. She's been working for more than a decade, and she is only on the way up from here. Basically, I'm a big fan. I look forward to watching her change the industry. She's working with so many respectable names that have been putting in the work for years upon years to prep the land and sow the seeds so that the indigenous reps of today and tomorrow will be able to enjoy the shade of the trees that they have grown. Don't hate my gardening similes. I've had some wines while I was writing this. That is all that I have to say about Devery Jacobs. I hope to see her for many, many more years involved in so many projects that I can't even keep up, and that she achieves all of her goals for integrating Native language and culture into as many projects as she possibly can. This concludes the Devery Jacobs fangirl portion of the video, and that's basically the end of what I have to say about this episode. Well, not the end. I mean, I cut 2 pages from the script, and if anyone even hinted that they had reservations for dinner, I'd hit them with several more minutes of how much I love this show. But that is certainly enough for me for now. There's a whole new episode I have not gotten to watch yet because I haven't finished with this one, so I'm going to rush off and go do that right now. Thank you so much for watching. Please give a like if you made it to the end of all this. I know I go on forever, but essay writing was my favorite part of going to school, and my only expertise is in watching television, so this is what I do part-time. Y'all be sure to stay safe out there.